You've been planning this all along. What kind of monster are you? Seth spat out, his face contorted with shock. I could only smile. The kind who's had enough. It all started 3 days ago when I stumbled upon explicit texts on Seth's phone. He'd left it on the kitchen counter, buzzing incessantly. Curiosity got the best of me, and there they were. Texts from a woman named Brooke, laced with promises and scandalous photos. My pulse quickened, and my vision blurred as I scrolled through the damning evidence. That evening, I confronted him while we washed up from dinner. "Who's Brooke?" I asked, doing my best to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. He dropped the dish he was rinsing. It shattered on the kitchen floor, an apt metaphor for the sense of betrayal shredding my insides. "Alicia, I can explain," he stammered. "Go ahead." My arms were crossed, and I raised an eyebrow, daring him to lie to me. Seth sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. It was a mistake, a one-time thing. I was lonely, and she was just there. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I tilted my head, weighing the sincerity in his eyes with the venom in those texts. "How long has it been going on?" His shoulders sank. "A few months," he admitted, voice barely more than a whisper. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Months, Seth? And you're calling it a mistake?" I clenched my fists, my voice rising. "That's not how mistakes work." He moved closer, pleading, "Alicia, please. I'll do anything to make this right. I've been such a fool. I love you, not her." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you love me?" I began pacing the kitchen, my thoughts racing. "Here's what's going to happen. You'll cut off all contact with her. You'll account for all your time when you're away from me. You screw this up, and it's over, Seth. Do you understand?" He nodded frantically. "I'll do it. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. I just want us to be okay." "Actions, not words," I muttered, turning away to hide the tears welling up in my eyes. That night, we slept back to back, an invisible chasm wider than our king-sized bed separating us. The sense of betrayal gnawed at me relentlessly, but I vowed silently not to be a passive victim. If Seth could play dirty, so could I. The next morning, the house was eerily silent. Seth left for work, his movements careful, his posture pained. I stared at his retreating figure, feelings of disbelief mingling with a cold, budding resolve. As a paralegal, I knew a thing or two about gathering evidence. There would be no more sweeping things under the rug. This time, retribution would follow. Standing in the doorway, I watched him drive away, my mind racing with thoughts of how to outmaneuver this betrayal. This was war now. Turning back inside, I pulled out my phone and typed a number. "Louise? I need to talk. It's about Seth. No, not just talk. Plan." And thus began my careful descent into Seth's web of deceit, determined to tear it down strand by sordid strand. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routine and scrutiny. I watched Seth like a hawk, making sure he adhered to the strict conditions I'd set. He'd text me whenever he left work, checked in throughout the day, and made a point of coming home on time. His efforts seemed sincere, but the wound was still fresh, the trust broken. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch watching TV, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, eyes darting up to see if I'd noticed. I pretended to be engrossed in the show, but saw the flash of guilt on his face. "Who's that?" I asked casually. He hesitated before answering. "Just a work thing. Nothing important." "Mind if I see?" I reached out my hand. "Really, Alicia? You don't trust me?" His voice was strained, defensive. "I think I have every right not to," I said, my voice icy. "Hand it over." Reluctantly, he did. It was a group message from his sales team, innocuous enough, but his hesitation had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Late-night work calls became a frequent occurrence again. He'd step outside to take them, trying to be discreet. The conversations were muffled, but I could sense the familiarity, the ease in his voice that clearly wasn't talking business. It was always the same excuse, just wrapping up a project. I played along, nodding, pretending to trust. One night, I followed him outside. "Who are you talking to, Seth?" He nearly jumped out of his skin. "Alicia! I'm just talking to Kevin, my manager. What's your problem?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "My problem is that this all feels very familiar, like history repeating itself." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I told you I'm not talking to Brooke anymore. I'm trying to fix this, Alicia. Are you?" I raised an eyebrow, because it sure doesn't feel that way. Days turned into weeks, and the signs kept resurfacing in subtle ways. His phone's screen turned away from me, the extra minutes in the bathroom, the constant urgency in his voice during these work calls. One day, when he left his phone on the counter again, I took it. There were no traces of anything suspicious. He'd gotten smarter, more careful. But my gut told me differently. I needed concrete proof. That's when I decided to start quietly investigating. I noted down the numbers he called frequently, the times he was supposedly working late. I charted it all out. My mind focused on one goal: uncovering the truth. Louise was my sounding board, providing a mix of moral support and strategic advice. "Have you thought about hiring someone? A private investigator, maybe?" she suggested one evening over coffee. I nodded. "That's my next move. But first, I want to catch him slips up. He's bound to make a mistake." Just as I finished saying that, Seth walked in. He looked between us, suspicion etched on his face. "What's going on?" "Just catching up," I said, smiling sweetly. "Is that a problem?" He shook his head. "No, just felt like you were talking about me." I stood up, staring him down. "Paranoid much?" He didn't respond, just walked away, the tension palpable. His steps were careful, cautious. This had only just begun. The game of trust and deceit was still in play, and I intended to win. One Friday evening, I decided to leave work a bit early. I had a hunch, a bad feeling that had been simmering for days. Instead of taking my usual route, I drove by a small coffee shop several blocks from Seth's office. That's when I saw them, Seth and Brooke, sitting in a corner booth, their heads close together, sharing laughter and too many smiles. My heart raced and my hands tightened around the steering wheel. I parked across the street and pulled out my phone, discreetly snapping a few pictures. There was no mistaking the affection in their eyes. Seth had broken every promise. Back home, I paced the living room, my mind racing. There was no denying it now. I needed more than just photos. I needed concrete evidence for the upcoming storm. The next morning, I dialed the number Louise had given me. "Detective Rivera?" I asked when he answered. "Yes. And you are?" "Alicia. A friend referred me. I need help." He met me at a small diner later that evening. Detective Rivera was a seasoned investigator, his eyes sharp and observant. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "My husband's having an affair. Again, I need evidence, something I can use." He nodded, pulling out a notepad. "I need details. His schedule, places he frequents, the other woman's info, if you have it." I handed him a small folder. "It's all in there. Her name is Brooke." "I'll get started immediately," he said, standing up. "You'll hear from me soon." Over the next few days, Seth maintained his facade, acting like a devoted husband. But at night, when he was asleep, I would check the updates from Rivera, photos, timestamps, receipts, all piling up to form an undeniable narrative of deceit. One evening, I showed the updates to Louise. "He's a scumbag," she spat. "You should call him out right now." "Not yet," I replied, a glint of steel in my voice. "I need irrefutable evidence and a solid plan. I want to make sure he can't worm his way out." Louise nodded. "So, what's next?" "I'll confront Brooke," I said, the plan taking shape in my mind. "Make her confess in public." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Seth mentioned a business trip, and Brooke planned to meet him at a different location. I arranged a meeting with Brooke under the guise of wanting to understand her side, tricking her into thinking I was leaving Seth and needed closure. At the agreed time, I arrived early, positioning myself discreetly in the cafe. Brooke walked in, clearly confident, almost smug. We sat down, and I cut to the chase. "Brooke, how long has it been going on?" She smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Months. Seth told you it was over, didn't he? He lies easily." I pulled out my phone and pressed record. "Say that again." Brooke blinked, realizing too late. Fury and embarrassment flashed across her face. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes," I replied, standing up. "Now everyone knows." I gestured around, where curious onlookers had started paying attention. Brooke stormed out, and I left, feeling a small sense of triumph. One step closer. The next phase was calling Seth's bluff. He walked in that night, confused but with no idea what was coming for him. "How was your day?" he asked nonchalantly. "Eventful," I said, lifting my head, determination burning in my eyes. "Let's talk." And talk we would. But not before I laid out every piece of evidence, every lie, every betrayal. This wasn't over, far from it. The game had only just begun. Seth walked into the house, his smile fading as he saw me waiting in the living room. "Alicia, what's going on?" I stood, holding the folder of evidence. We need to talk, Seth. He laughed nervously. This sounds serious. It is. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table, spilling photos of him and Brooke along with timestamps and receipts. His face paled as he realized what he was seeing. What the hell is this? He muttered, flipping through the documents. You tell me, I shot back, arms crossed. This is crazy, Alicia. You've got it all wrong. This isn't what it looks like. I leaned forward, eyes locked on his. Isn't it? You said it was over. You said you'd cut her off. But these pictures, they say you've been lying to me every single day. Seth ran his fingers through his hair, frustration spilling over. Fine, all right, I lied, but it wasn't serious. It never was. You mean everything to me. I could feel my temper rising. How long, Seth? I demanded. How long have you been lying to my face? He hesitated. A few months, he admitted, averting his gaze. Months, and you thought I wouldn't find out? Did you really think you could keep deceiving me forever? I made a mistake, Alicia. I'm human. Everyone makes mistakes. But not everyone repeats them, I said coldly. This isn't a mistake, Seth. This is betrayal. His anger flared. And what about you, huh? Spying on me, hiring detectives? What does that make you? A woman who's had enough, I replied sharply. A woman who is done being played for a fool. You don't mean that, he said, stepping closer. We can work through this. I'll change, I swear. It's too late for that, I said, walking away. I pulled out my phone. I've been recording our conversations for weeks, every lie, every fake apology, and now I want you to go upstairs, get your things, and leave this house. Seth's eyes widened. You can't be serious. One more thing, I continued, not missing a beat. I've invited Brooke for a talk tomorrow. You'll join us. What? He looked bewildered. You're insane. I smirked. Maybe. But you'll be there, or I'll expose you before you even get a chance to defend yourself. The next day, I arranged to meet Brooke at a cafe. Just as planned, Seth walked in behind her. They both looked stunned to see each other. What is this? Brooke asked, her eyes darting between us. I casually pulled out my phone again. Just a friendly chat. Seth, why don't you start? Seth's face tightened. Alicia, please? Now, I growled. He took a deep breath. Brooke, it's over. Alicia knows everything. Brooke scoffed. You think this is over? We had something real, Seth. Real? I interjected. Real enough to lie to both of us? Seth sank into a chair, defeated. Brooke's eyes burned with anger. You tricked me, she hissed. Consider it a taste of your own medicine, I said, standing up. You deserve each other. Across the cafe, curious eyes watched as I walked out, my head held high. It was a small victory, but the war was far from over. With Seth humiliated and Brooke exposed, one phase of my plan was complete. Now it was time to take the next steps. This was only the beginning of Seth's downfall, and I was determined to see it through to the end. Seth came home that night with a dark, thunderous look. What the hell was that? He growled, slamming the door behind him. I stood my ground. That was a public service announcement. Now everyone knows the truth. His face twisted in anger. You've humiliated me, Alicia, in front of everyone. My colleagues, my friends. Did you expect any less after what you did? I shot back, arms crossed. You're insane, he snapped. You've lost it. Maybe I have, I said, voice steady. Maybe you drove me to it. Seth closed the distance between us, his eyes burning with rage. You're going to pay for this. You think you can just ruin my life? Your life? I scoffed. What about mine? You've lied, cheated, and turned it upside down. You deserve every bit of this. This isn't over, he threatened, but I didn't flinch. You think you can just walk away from this mess you created? I'm not walking away, Seth. I'm walking out. I've got the evidence, and I'm filing for divorce. His eyes widened in shock. You can't be serious. Oh, I am, I said, pulling out the papers I had prepared. Tomorrow, these go to Janet. She's already expecting them. Seth's fury escalated. You're just going to give up on us? Throw everything away? You already did that, I retorted. I'm just making it official. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the whole house seemed to shake. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. I made sure to record any interactions, his threats, his angry outbursts, all part of the plan. I went to see Janet, my lawyer and mentor. I've got everything we need, I said, handing her the folder. She flipped through the documents, nodding with approval. This is solid. He won't be able to refute this. Good, I said. He deserves everything that's coming. Janet looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. How are you holding up, Alicia? I'm fine, I replied, though the fatigue in my voice betrayed me. I just want this over with. Janet reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're strong. You'll get through this. The following days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Seth's attempts to reconcile grew more desperate, more insistent. One night he showed up unannounced, his eyes wild and pleading. Please, Alicia, he begged, don't do this. We can fix this. There's nothing left to fix, I said firmly, not letting him see the slight tremor in my hand. This is the end. That's when his demeanor changed. He snapped, spilling out anger and venom. You'll regret this. You're going to end up alone. I'll take that risk, I said, stepping back. Now get out. That night I packed my things, moving out while he was still fuming in the driveway. As I drove away, I felt a mixture of fear and liberation. This was a new beginning, but I knew the battle wasn't over. My revenge was far from complete. Seth would feel the weight of his actions, and I would ensure justice was served. As I watched our house disappear in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but feel a fierce resolve hardening in my chest. This was just the beginning of the end for Seth. I stepped into Janet's office, the scent of coffee and paper mingling in the air. She greeted me with a firm handshake. Ready to get started? More than ready, I nodded. Janet took a seat at her desk, arranging the documents in front of her. We're going to throw everything we've got at him, infidelity, threats. It's all here. Make sure he doesn't see it coming, I said, a determined edge in my voice. She smiled. He won't. Trust me. I've handled worse. The legal battle began swiftly. Seth was blindsided by the alimony and compensation case. I watched as the shock registered on his face when he was served the papers at work, standing beside Janet as she laid out our case with surgical precision. You're really doing this, Seth spat, a mixture of disbelief and rage in his eyes. Yes, I am, I said calmly. You brought this on yourself. Janet didn't miss a beat. Mr. Williams, your repeated infidelity and abusive behavior are all well documented. This case is airtight. Seth's lawyer, a middle-aged man with a perpetual frown, tried to interject. We'll contest these allegations. Janet leaned forward, sat her gaze unwavering. Feel free to try, but Alicia's evidence is overwhelming. You won't win this. Over the next few days, Seth's attempts to reconcile became almost pathetic. He called constantly, leaving voicemails filled with pleas and apologies. I didn't respond. Janet advised me to let the legal process play out without engaging him. He's desperate, she noted, reviewing the latest documents. Don't give him the satisfaction of breaking you down. I won't, I assured her. He's lost all his power over me. We went through Seth's finances meticulously, ensuring we traced every asset. The more we uncovered, the more it painted a picture of deceit and manipulation. Seth had underestimated my resolve and capability. The day we stepped into the courtroom, Seth looked worn out, shadows under his eyes betraying his sleepless nights. I stood tall, my heart pounding, but my mind focused. Janet presented our case with confidence, detailing Seth's betrayal and the emotional toll it had taken on me. Your Honor, Alicia deserves compensation for the years of deceit and abuse she has endured. Seth's lawyer attempted to paint a picture of marital discord, but the evidence was irrefutable. When it was over, the judge ruled in our favor. Seth was ordered to pay substantial alimony and part of our shared assets. Outside the courtroom, Seth approached me. Alicia, please. I shook my head. It's too late, Seth. This is justice, not revenge. You'll have to live with the consequences of your actions. His face crumbled. I never meant for it to end like this. You should have thought about that before, I replied, walking away. As I left the courthouse with Janet, I felt a sense of closure. This chapter of my life was ending, but I knew my journey wasn't over. There were still steps to take, and more to ensure Seth understood fully the cost of his betrayal. This was about more than just legal victory. It was about reclaiming my life. And I intended to do just that. Seth's downfall began to spiral faster than I anticipated. One morning, I received a tip that his company was planning a critical meeting. I seized the opportunity to act, delivering the evidence of his affair to his employer. Ethics and company policies were clearly outlined in their handbook, and Seth had breached them fundamentally. A couple days later, Seth's boss, Tom, called him into the office. I can only imagine the tension simmering in that room. I had made sure I had a witness, Louise, casually positioned in the lobby, ready to update me. Seth came out, his face ashen, lips pursed. He brushed past Louise without a word. Moments later, she texted, "He's been let go." It worked. The gravity of what I had done hit me, but there was no turning back now. My actions carried consequences, but they were deserved. The truth's weight was mine to leverage. The phone rang that evening. Seth's voice was raw, demanding. "Alicia, you did this. They fired me because of you." I remained calm. "No, Seth, they fired you because of what you did. Affairs don't look good on a resume, do they?" "I'll find another job," he threatened, but there was a hollow quality to his words. "Good luck explaining why you lost this one," I replied, ending the call. Next, I reached out to contacts within our financial circles, subtly ensuring Seth's reputation was tarnished. He had underestimated my connections and resolve. The professional world is smaller than one thinks, and rumors spread like wildfire. Within weeks, Seth was struggling. He couldn't secure a job that matched his previous status. Each attempt met with cold rejections or awkward deflections. The money started running out, and the reality of his situation began to sink in. One afternoon, I decided it was time to deal with Brooke. I crafted an anonymous email to her gym, attaching the evidence of her affair with Seth. Within days, she was let go due to misconduct. Louise reported back gleefully, "Her reputation's in shreds. People are talking." Brooke called me, her voice frantic. "Alicia, why are you doing this? You've ruined my life." "You ruined mine first," I said coldly, hanging up the phone. She had meddled in my life, and now she faced the consequences. Weeks turned into a couple of months, and the power balance shifted entirely. Seth was financially ruined, his personal and professional life in tatters. He tried to reach out one last time, a broken man. We met in a small park, the fall leaves crunching underfoot. Seth looked disheveled, desperation seeping from his every pore. "What do you want, Seth?" I said, arms crossed. "Please, Alicia, I know I messed up, but I've lost everything. Help me get back on my feet. We can start over," he pleaded. I shook my head. "This isn't my problem. You did this to yourself." "You're heartless," he spat, the last bit of venom he could muster. "Call it whatever you want. I call it justice." I turned and walked away, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. This was a new beginning for me, and there was no room for anything or anyone that pulled me back. Moving to Oregon was the fresh start I desperately needed. Nestled in a small, supportive community, I rediscovered the pieces of myself that had been choked by betrayal and deceit. The air felt different, cleaner, without the weight of Seth's lies lingering around me. I spent my mornings jogging through tree-lined paths, feeling the tension drain with each step. I took up pottery, molding clay into shapes and forms that symbolized a new beginning, a message to myself that I could reshape my life. One sunny afternoon, I was in a local cafe, sipping on a latte and reading a novel. The bell above the door chimed, and Louise walked in, her face lighting up when she saw me. She had flown in to check on me as good friends do. "Alicia, you look incredible," she said, embracing me tightly. "I feel incredible," I replied with a grin. We sat and chatted about everything and nothing. For the first time in months, my laughter wasn't tinged with bitterness. It was pure, a sound I thought I'd lost forever. "You deserve this," Louise said, sipping her coffee. "Your strength through all this has been inspiring." "Thanks, Louise. I just had to find myself again." Later that evening, I joined a yoga class. The instructor, a gentle soul named Clara, led us through poses, each movement designed to center and calm. After the session, I felt a tranquility I hadn't known in years. Clara approached me. "You have a strong presence," she remarked. "Have you practiced yoga long?" "Not really," I laughed. "I'm just trying to find balance in my life again." She nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "You're doing wonderfully." The things I once enjoyed, baking, reading, gardening, filled my days now. I reveled in the simplicity, the normalcy. My little house quickly became a home, adorned with flowers and filled with the scent of fresh bread. One afternoon, while I was arranging a new flower bed, a neighbor, Mary, stopped by. She had a serene demeanor and an infectious smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, handing me a basket of freshly picked apples. "If you ever need anything, just holler." "Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that," I replied warmly. The sense of community here was palpable, and it made the transition easier. Weeks turned into months, and the shadows of the past receded. I reflected on my journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and ultimately, the justice I'd served. Each step had been painful but necessary. I was stronger now, more resilient. One evening, I attended a local fair with some newfound friends. Amidst the music, laughter, and bright lights, I felt a profound sense of peace. The past no longer held power over me. I had walked through fire and emerged, not unscathed, but wiser and more determined. As I looked around, I realized that I wasn't alone in this realization. We all had our battles, our scars. But here, in this moment, we were simply living, breathing, and enjoying life. I took a deep breath and smiled. This, truly, was a new beginning. Stepping into the future with hope, I knew that whatever came next, I could face it with the strength and courage I had found within myself. I stared at Delia's newborn cradled in her arms, an overwhelming sense of disbelief washing over me. My eyes darted between the tiny bundle and the man standing beside her. Greg, my husband of 7 years. "What's going on?" I choked out, unable to process the sight before me. Delia, my supposed best friend since college, looked up at me with an expression I didn't recognize. "Leela, I should have told you sooner," she began, her voice laced with guilt. "Greg and I, we're together. This is our child." The words hit me like a ton of bricks, stealing my breath away. My mind raced back to our carefree days at university, when Delia and I were inseparable. We'd shared every secret, every triumph and heartbreak. How could she betray me like this? Greg shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my gaze. "Lila, I'm sorry. It just happened." "It just happened," I echoed, fury rapidly replacing the initial shock. "You've been sleeping with my best friend behind my back, and that's all you have to say?" Delia flinched, clutching the baby closer. "We never meant to hurt you, Lila. Things just got complicated." Complicated didn't begin to cover it. My marriage, my friendships, my entire world, all crumbling before my eyes. I thought back to the past year, Greg's frequent business trips and late nights at the office. The signs were there, but I'd been too blind to see them. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. Greg sighed heavily. "About a year. A year. 12 months of lies and deception right under my nose. I felt sick to my stomach. Delia reached out to me, her eyes pleading. "Lila, please try to understand." "Understand?" I cut her off, recoiling from her touch. "How can I possibly understand this? You've betrayed me in the worst way imaginable." Greg stepped forward, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "It's not that simple, Lila. Delia and I, we love each other." His words felt like a slap in the face. "Love? You don't know the meaning of the word." I spun on my heel, unable to bear the sight of them any longer. "Don't worry, you won't have to explain yourselves. I'm done." As I stormed out of the hospital room, the weight of their betrayal threatened to crush me. But beneath the pain and anger, a newfound resolve took root. They would pay for this. I would make sure of it. The drive home passed in a blur, a torrent of emotions raging within me. Delia's betrayal stung deeper than I could have imagined, her selfish actions shattering the bond we once shared. But it was Greg's deceit that cut me to the core. The man I'd vowed to spend my life with had obliterated that promise without a second thought. As I pulled into the driveway, I steeled myself, forcing a mask of calm over my features. Greg couldn't know the depths of my knowledge, not yet. I needed to play along, to gather the evidence that would bring their twisted game crashing down. The front door swung open, and there he stood, a bemused expression on his face. "Everything okay? You look shaken up." I mustered a tight smile, willing my voice steady. "Yeah, just a long day at the hospital visiting Delia." The lies slipped off my tongue with surprising ease. "You know how exhausting she can be." Greg chuckled, seemingly oblivious to the maelstrom raging within me. "That's our Delia, always one for drama." He pulled me into an embrace, and I fought the urge to recoil from his touch. Over the next few days, I watched him like a hawk, scrutinizing his every move for signs of his deception. The little things I'd once overlooked now glared at me. The lingering scent of an unfamiliar perfume, the furtive glances at his phone, the late nights working. How could I have been so blind? Determined to unravel the truth, I made a call to an old friend, a private investigator I'd known since college. Within hours, he had Greg's movements under surveillance, tracking his comings and goings with meticulous detail. The evidence trickled in slowly at first, receipts for expensive dinners, hotel charges on our joint credit card. But then the floodgates opened and a clearer picture emerged. Delia had been siphoning money from our accounts for months, funneling it into a hidden slush fund. Plane tickets, jewelry, even a down payment on a cozy little bungalow, all purchased with our hard-earned savings, all part of their twisted plan. With each new revelation, my fury burned hotter, an inferno of rage threatening to consume me. But I kept my cool, maintaining the facade of marital bliss while secretly plotting my revenge. Then, one fateful day, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. A copy of a prenatal agreement between Greg and Delia, outlining their intentions to raise the child together, at my expense. I clutched the damning document, my hands trembling. They'd played me for a fool, using my love and trust as weapons against me. But no more. It was time to strike back, to expose their web of lies and make them face the consequences of their actions. As I looked up, my gaze fell on Greg, laughing and chatting with friends like nothing was amiss. A cruel smile tugged at my lips. Oh, how the tables were about to turn. With the prenatal agreement in hand, I finally had the smoking gun I needed. Greg and Delia's deception was laid bare, their treacherous plot exposed in black and white. But the document was just the tip of the iceberg. My investigation had unearthed a trail of lies that ran deeper than I could have imagined. Greg's suspicious behavior only escalated in the following days, his absences growing longer and more frequent. I'd catch him poring over financial statements late into the night, his brow furrowed with worry. Little did he know, I was one step ahead, meticulously cataloging every cent he and Delia had siphoned from our accounts. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into offshore accounts and untraceable investments. It was clear they'd been planning this for years, methodically bleeding me dry while I remained obliviously in love. Through it all, I maintained my facade of normalcy, playing the doting wife while quietly gathering the arsenal that would bring them to their knees. But even as the evidence mounted, a part of me still struggled to comprehend the depths of their betrayal. How could Delia, my oldest friend, the woman who'd once sworn to be my maid of honor, do this to me? We'd shared everything, from our deepest secrets to our wildest dreams. Yet she'd cast it all aside without a second thought, seduced by the promise of wealth and a twisted sense of entitlement. And Greg? The man I'd vowed to love and cherish, the father I'd hoped to raise children with. His lies cut deepest of all, a vile violation of the sacred trust between husband and wife. I'd given him everything, and he'd repaid me with deceit and betrayal. As the days ticked by, my resentment festered, fueled by each new revelation. I pored over the evidence, committing every sordid detail to memory. The fake business trips, the clandestine rendezvous, the countless nights they'd lain together while I remained blissfully unaware. Through it all, I remained an island of calm on the surface, even as a storm of rage raged within me. Greg grew increasingly distant, his guilt and paranoia driving a wedge between us. But I played along, biding my time until the perfect moment to strike. That moment came in the form of a family gathering, a celebration of my sister-in-law's promotion at work. It was the ideal stage, a chance to expose their duplicity before the very people they'd hoped to deceive. As the invitations went out, I couldn't help but smile at the delicious irony. They thought they were attending a joyous occasion, blissfully unaware that it would be the scene of their downfall. Little did they know, the game was up, and I held all the cards. With each passing day my anticipation grew, a heady mix of dread and exhilaration coursing through my veins. Soon they would face the consequences of their actions, their lies laid bare before the world. And I would be the one to deliver the final crushing blow. As the days ticked down to the fateful family gathering, I found an unexpected ally in my quest for retribution. Greg's own sister, Jenna. It turned out she'd harbored suspicions about her brother's fidelity for years, her intuition picking up on the subtle signs I'd been too naive to see. "I always knew there was something off about him," she confided in me over coffee one afternoon. "The late nights, the shady business deals, it all reeked of a man with something to hide." I nodded grimly, sliding the damning prenatal agreement across the table. Jenna's eyes widened as she scanned the document, her expression morphing from shock to fury. "That bastard," she hissed, slamming her fist on the table. "How could he do this to you, Lila? To our family?" In that moment, I saw a kindred spirit in Jenna, a woman wronged by the same man, her trust betrayed by blood. Without hesitation, I laid out the full scope of Greg and Delia's deception, every sordid detail I'd uncovered through my investigation. Jenna listened in stunned silence, her anger growing with each revelation. By the time I finished, she was trembling with rage, her knuckles white from gripping the table's edge. "We have to make them pay," she growled, her eyes blazing with determination. "They can't be allowed to get away with this." I nodded, a grim smile tugging at my lips. "That's exactly what I intend to do." Over the next few days, Jenna and I became co-conspirators, meticulously plotting our revenge. We pored over the evidence, strategizing the perfect moment and method to expose Greg and Delia's duplicity. "The family gathering is our best shot," Jenna mused, tapping her pen against the stack of incriminating documents. "We can't let them wriggle out of this one." "Agreed," I replied, my voice steely with resolve. "They need to face the consequences of their actions in front of everyone they've betrayed." As the event drew nearer, our plans solidified. We would let Greg and Delia bask in the illusion of normalcy, lulling them into a false sense of security. Then, at the height of the celebration, we would drop our bombshell, unleashing the full weight of their deception before the entire family. "They'll have nowhere to run," Jenna murmured, a predatory glint in her eye. "No more lies, no more secrets, just the ugly truth laid bare for all to see." With each passing day, my anticipation grew, fueled by the knowledge that retribution was finally within reach. Greg and Delia had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and their arrogance would be their undoing. As the hours ticked down, I found myself dwelling on Delia's betrayal, the sting of her deceit cutting deeper than I could have imagined. We'd been more than friends. We'd been sisters, bound by an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of youth. Yet she'd cast it all aside without a second thought, seduced by the promise of wealth and a twisted sense of entitlement. Her actions spoke of a darkness within, a bottomless well of greed and manipulation that knew no bounds. With each new revelation about her past misdeeds, my disgust grew. The friendships she'd sabotaged, the lives she'd callously upended in pursuit of her own desires. She was a viper in human skin, striking without remorse or regret. But soon her venomous ways would be laid bare. Her toxic influence forever purged from my life. Jenna and I would see to that, our righteous fury burning hotter with every treacherous detail we uncovered. As the appointed day dawned, a sense of grim determination settled over me. It was time to stop playing the victim and take control of my own destiny. Greg and Delia had made their bed, and now they would lie in it, their web of lies unraveled before the very people they'd sought to deceive. No more games, no more deception. Only the cold, hard truth and the consequences they so richly deserved. The days leading up to the family gathering were a flurry of activity as Jenna and I meticulously prepared for our grand reveal. Every detail had to be perfect, from the staging of the evidence to the timing of our dramatic entrance. "We can't leave anything to chance," Jenna muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration as she arranged the damning documents in a precise order. "One misstep, and they'll try to wriggle their way out of this mess." I nodded grimly, my jaw set with determination. "They won't get that chance. We'll have them dead to rights, with nowhere to run." As the appointed day drew nearer, a strange dichotomy took hold within me. On the surface, I maintained a facade of normalcy, going about my daily routine as if nothing were amiss. But beneath that veneer, a storm of emotions raged. Anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for justice. Greg remained oblivious to the gathering storm, his guilt and paranoia driving him deeper into a spiral of deception. I watched him with a mixture of pity and disgust, marveling at the depths to which he had sunk. "How could you do this to me, Greg?" I asked one night, my voice laced with venom. "To our family?" He froze, his eyes wide with fear and guilt. For a moment, I thought he might finally come clean, to confess his sins and beg for forgiveness. But then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out, his words dripping with vitriol. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he spat, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you're so innocent, but you're just as guilty as the rest of us." His words stung, but I refused to let him see my pain. Instead, I met his gaze with a steely resolve, my voice low and dangerous. "Keep telling yourself that, Greg. But know this, the truth always comes out in the end, no matter how hard you try to bury it." As the days ticked down, the tension in our household became palpable, a thick fog of mistrust and resentment that hung heavy in the air. Greg grew increasingly distant, his guilt driving a wedge between us that seemed insurmountable. But through it all, Jenna and I remained steadfast, our resolve hardening with each passing hour. We were warriors on a mission, armed with the weapons of truth and justice, and nothing would deter us from our path. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived, and we put the final touches on our plan. The stage was set, the evidence meticulously arranged, and the guest list carefully curated to ensure maximum impact. As the guests began to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of excitement mingled with trepidation. This was it. The moment we'd been building towards, the culmination of weeks of planning and preparation. Greg and Delia arrived fashionably late, as always, their smug expressions a clear indication that they had no idea what was in store for them. As they mingled with the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and basking in the illusion of normalcy, I caught Jenna's eye from across the room. She gave me a subtle nod, her expression grim and determined. It was time. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, the weight of the evidence heavy in my hands. All eyes turned towards me, a hush falling over the room as I cleared my throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady and unwavering. "But I'm afraid this isn't the celebration you were led to believe." Greg's brow furrowed in confusion, but before he could speak, I pressed on. "No, this is something far more important, a reckoning, if you will. This is a chance to shed light on the lies and deception that have been festering in our midst for far too long." Jenna stepped forward, her expression steely as she brandished the stack of documents. "Greg and Delia, you have been caught red-handed," she announced, her voice ringing out in the stunned silence. "Your betrayal, your greed, your utter disregard for the people who loved you. It all ends here today." As the truth began to unfold, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes widened in shock and disbelief. But I pressed on, unflinching, laying bare every sordid detail of their duplicity. The stolen money, the secret rendezvous, the twisted prenatal agreement, nothing was left uncovered, no stone unturned in our pursuit of justice. With each new revelation, Greg and Delia's faces drained of color, their smug expressions replaced by ones of abject horror. And when it was over, when the last damning piece of evidence had been presented, a deafening silence hung in the air. All eyes turned towards the disgraced couple, their guilt laid bare for all to see. In that moment, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me, a righteous fury that burned brighter than any flame. They had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences, the scorn and condemnation of the very people they had sought to deceive. As Greg opened his mouth to speak, to offer some feeble excuse or desperate plea for forgiveness, I held up my hand, silencing him with a single defiant gesture. "Save your breath," I said, my voice laced with icy contempt. "The time for lies is over. You've dug your graves, and now you'll lie in them." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving them to face the music they had so richly earned. The game was over, the battle won, and justice, at long last, had been served. The moment the truth spilled forth, a hush descended over the room, the weight of Greg and Delia's betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Stunned faces turned towards the disgraced couple, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Greg was the first to break the silence, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Leila, you can't be serious. This is all just a big misunderstanding." I fixed him with a withering glare, my voice dripping with contempt. "Save it, Greg. The evidence speaks for itself. Your lies, your deceit, your utter disregard for me and our family. It's all right here, laid bare for everyone to see." Delia stepped forward, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You're making a huge mistake, Lila," she hissed, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Greg and I love each other. We were going to come clean, to start a new life together." A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disbelief. "Is that what you tell yourself at night, Delia? That this was all some grand love affair, some romantic notion of destiny?" I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "Let me clear the air for you. This was nothing more than a calculated scheme, a vile plot to bleed me dry and leave me with nothing. And the worst part? You used our friendship, our bond, as a weapon against me." Jenna stepped forward, her expression one of barely contained fury as she brandished a sheaf of documents. "Don't even try to deny it, you two. We have it all right here. The money trails, the secret accounts, the twisted prenatal agreement." As she began to recite the sordid details of their deception, Greg and Delia's faces paled, the realization of their exposure setting in. Murmurs of outrage rippled through the crowd, hands flying to cover gasps of shock and horror. "You see?" I said, my voice ringing out over the din. This was never about love or destiny or any of that fairy tale garbage. It was about greed, pure and simple, a despicable act of betrayal perpetrated by two people who claimed to care about me. Greg opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Don't bother with excuses or apologies, Greg. They'll fall on deaf ears. You made your bed, and now you get to lie in it." Turning to face the stunned guests, I took a deep, steadying breath. I know this is a lot to take in, believe me, but the truth had to come out, no matter how ugly or painful it might be. Greg and Delia have been living a lie, spinning a web of deception that ensnared us all. "But no more," Jenna chimed in, her voice resolute. "Their games end here, their lies exposed for all to see. It's time for them to face the consequences of their actions." As the weight of our words sank in, a palpable shift occurred in the room. The initial shock and disbelief gave way to outrage, fingers pointed and voices raised in condemnation. Greg and Delia shrank back, their facade of confidence crumbling in the face of such overwhelming censure. But just when I thought their humiliation was complete, one final twist emerged, a revelation that not even I could have anticipated. "You know, Lila," Delia said, her voice laced with a newfound bravado, "you're only seeing part of the picture here." My brow furrowed as I regarded her warily. "What are you talking about?" A cruel smile twisted her lips as she beckoned Greg closer. "Go on, darling. Tell them the real reason you got involved with me in the first place." Greg hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, before finally letting out a defeated sigh. "The truth is, Delia never really loved me. This was all just a long con, a way for her to get her hands on our money." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the full weight of his words sank in. Delia, emboldened by Greg's confession, tossed her head back and laughed, a cold, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine. "That's right," she crowed, her eyes glittering with malice. "Greg was just a means to an end, a useful idiot to be bled dry until there was nothing left. And once I had what I wanted, I was going to leave his sorry ass in the dust." The room erupted in a cacophony of outrage, voices raised in a clamor of fury and condemnation. But through it all, Delia remained unrepentant, her expression one of smug satisfaction. As for Greg, he simply hung his head in shame, the full weight of his betrayal and stupidity crashing down upon him. In that moment, I felt a fleeting pang of pity for the man I had once loved, a weak, pathetic creature who had allowed himself to be so thoroughly manipulated and deceived. But that pity was quickly overshadowed by a sense of grim vindication. Delia's true nature had been laid bare for all to see, her veneer of charm and innocence stripped away to reveal the cold, calculating monster beneath. As the chaos swirled around us, I caught Jenna's eye, a silent understanding passing between us. Our mission had been accomplished, and then some. Not only had we exposed Greg and Delia's lies, but we had uncovered an even deeper layer of depravity. With a small nod, we turned and walked away, leaving the disgraced pair to face the music they had so richly earned. The battle was won, the truth laid bare, and in the end, justice had prevailed. In the aftermath of the explosive revelation, a deafening silence descended over the room, broken only by the occasional murmur of disbelief or outraged whisper. All eyes were fixed on Greg and Delia, the once smug couple reduced to cowering, disgraced shells of their former selves. I stepped forward, my voice ringing out loud and clear. "Well, there you have it, folks, the truth in all its ugly glory. Greg and Delia, the lying, cheating, manipulative scum who thought they could play us all for fools." Delia opened her mouth, no doubt to spew forth another torrent of excuses or justifications, but I silenced her with a sharp gesture. "Save your breath, Delia. Your words are as hollow and meaningless as your supposed love for Greg. You've been exposed for the vile, greedy snake that you truly are." Greg flinched as if struck, his face a mask of shame and regret. "Lila, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just lost." weak. Delia took advantage of me, preyed on my vulnerabilities. A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disgust. Don't even try to play the victim card, Greg. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. Turning to face the stunned guests, I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what was to come. Friends, family, I know this is a lot to take in. Believe me, I understand the shock, the outrage, the sense of betrayal you're all feeling right now. But this is the reality we face. 2 people we trusted, 2 people we loved, have revealed themselves to be nothing more than manipulative, selfish liars. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by nods and muttered curses directed at the disgraced pair. And now, it falls to us to decide what comes next. Do we forgive them, turn a blind eye to their transgressions, and allow them to slink back into our lives, our trust forever shattered? Or do we stand tall, united in our resolve to see justice done? I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in before continuing. As for me, the choice is clear. Greg, you are no longer my husband, not in any way that matters. Our marriage, our vows, our entire life together, it was all built on a foundation of lies and deception, and I will not abide by that any longer. Greg opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with a withering glare. No, Greg, you don't get to speak, not anymore. Your words have lost all meaning, all power over me. From this day forward, I am severing all ties with you, legal, financial, emotional. You are dead to me, a ghost from a past I'm ready to leave behind. Turning to Delia, I felt a fresh wave of fury wash over me, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. And you vile manipulative serpent, you wormed your way into my life, exploited my trust and friendship for your own twisted gain. You are the embodiment of everything I despise: greed, selfishness, utter disregard for the harm you cause others. Delia recoiled as if struck, her eyes wide with fear and indignation, but I pressed on, undeterred. Mark my words, Delia, I will see you pay for what you've done. Every cent you've stolen, every life you've ruined in your quest for wealth and power, it will all come crashing down around you. The legal system may be blind, but I will make sure it sees the truth, the full extent of your depravity. A hush fell over the room as the gravity of my words sank in. Greg and Delia stood frozen, their faces pale and drawn, the weight of their sins finally bearing down upon them. So you see, there is no forgiveness here, no second chances. You've made your beds, and now you get to lie in them, surrounded by the wreckage of your lies and betrayals. With a final, contemptuous glance at the disgraced pair, I turned and walked away, my head held high. The battle was over, the war won. And in the end, justice would be served, no matter the cost. The fallout from the grand revelation was swift and uncompromising. Within days, the divorce papers had been filed, my lawyers moving with ruthless efficiency to extricate me from the cesspool of lies that had been my marriage to Greg. He won't know what hit him, my attorney assured me, a predatory glint in her eye as she outlined the legal onslaught we had planned. We're going to bleed him dry, just like he and that snake Delia tried to do to you. I nodded, my jaw set with grim determination. Good. I want him ruined, financially, socially, in every way imaginable. He doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed. True to her word, my legal team went for the jugular, meticulously documenting every cent Greg and Delia had siphoned from our accounts, every asset they'd acquired through their web of deceit. The paper trail was damning, a laundry list of fraud and financial malfeasance that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. As the case gained momentum, more and more of Delia's past misdeeds came to light, a veritable trail of broken friendships, ruined lives, and shattered trust in her wake. It seemed she'd been running her long con for years, preying on the naive and vulnerable with a ruthless, single-minded focus. With each new revelation, my disgust for the woman I'd once called my best friend deepened. How could I have been so blind, so utterly taken in by her lies and manipulations? The signs had all been there, but I'd chosen to ignore them, blinded by my own desperate desire to believe in the sanctity of our friendship. But no more. The scales had fallen from my eyes, and I saw Delia for the vile, heartless creature she truly was. And as the lawsuits and criminal charges piled up against her, I felt a savage sense of satisfaction, knowing that her reign of terror was finally coming to an end. Greg, for his part, tried every trick in the book to wriggle out of the legal noose tightening around his neck. He begged, he pleaded, he even tried to shift the blame onto Delia, painting himself as the helpless victim of her machinations. "You have to believe me, Leela," he implored during one particularly heated courtroom confrontation. "I was just a pawn in her game, a means to an end. I never meant to hurt you like this." I fixed him with a withering glare, my voice laced with icy contempt. "Save your breath, Greg. Your lies and excuses mean nothing to me now. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." As the legal battles raged on, my life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. The cloud of deception and betrayal that had hung over me for so long was finally starting to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of clarity and purpose. I threw myself into my work, pouring all my pain and anger into my writing. The words flowed like never before, each sentence a cathartic release, a purging of the toxicity that had plagued me for far too long. And as the dust settled and the legal battles reached their inevitable conclusion, I found myself standing triumphant amidst the wreckage of Greg and Delia's lies. They had been well and truly vanquished, their ill-gotten gains stripped away, their reputations in tatters. Greg was a shell of his former self, his once charming veneer stripped away to reveal the weak, cowardly man beneath. Delia, too, had been brought low, her arrogance and swagger replaced by the haunted look of a woman who had finally been made to face the consequences of her actions. As for me, I stood tall and unbroken, my resolve tempered by the fires of adversity. The pain and betrayal I had endured would forever leave their scars, but they had also made me stronger, more resilient than I ever could have imagined. With the legal battles behind me and my financial future secure, I turned my attention to the next chapter of my life. The world was my oyster, a blank canvas upon which I could paint the vibrant hues of my own destiny. I quit my job, said goodbye to the stifling confines of the office, and embarked on a new path, one of self-discovery, growth, and the pursuit of my true passions. I traveled, I explored, I immersed myself in the rich tapestry of life that had been denied to me for far too long. And through it all, I found myself surrounded by a newfound sense of freedom and joy, unburdened by the weight of lies and betrayal that had once threatened to crush me. My friends and family rallied around me, their love and support a constant reminder that true strength lies not in weathering the storm alone, but in embracing the unbreakable bonds of those who truly care. As I stood on the precipice of this new beginning, I couldn't help but reflect on the long, arduous journey that had brought me to this point. The pain, the heartbreak, the searing betrayal, it had all been a crucible, a test of my mettle and my resolve. And in the end, I had emerged victorious, tempered by the fires of adversity, but never consumed by them. Greg and Delia's lies had once threatened to break me, but instead they had forged me into something stronger, something unbreakable. With a contented smile, I turned my face towards the rising sun, basking in the warmth of a new day, a new life. The shadows of the past had been banished, and the future stretched out before me, ripe with boundless possibility. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly free. Free to chase my dreams, to embrace my passions, and to forge my own destiny on my own terms. The game was over, the battle won, and the spoils belonged to me alone.